The courtroom froze as a single email was read aloud. An email Kody Brown never wanted the world to see. The words landed like shrapnel. Reporters stopped scribbling mid-sentence. Cameras clicked, then stalled, as if the lenses themselves were trying to focus on the moment history changed. At the defense table, Kody didn't breathe. At the plaintiff's table, Christine finally did. The judge leaned forward, eyebrows tight, as Christine's attorney lowered the page, letting the sentence hang. She didn't rush. She wanted the silence to do the work. Everyone could feel it. The shift in gravity, the slant of power tipping away from the man who once controlled every conversation. At Christine's side, Janelle sat rigid, eyes steady, jaw clenched, a soldier braced for a blast. Meri remained rock still, but her fingers dug crescents into her forearms. The front rows were full of faces that had once smiled for TV, faces that now looked like they had nothing left to lose. Christine didn't blink. The pain lived behind her eyes, but so did resolve. She looked smaller today and somehow larger than life, like a mother who had outlived a storm and learned to name the clouds. "Your Honor," the attorney said at last, holding up the printed emails like an illuminated manuscript of betrayal. "We move to admit these communications as evidence. They establish intent, manipulation, and a pattern of concealment." Kody snapped. "Objection, those are private, Mr. Brown." The judge's voice was steel. "You will wait your turn." The folder moved from hand to hand, bailiff to clerk to bench, and every inch it traveled built a drumbeat in the room. The judge's eyes darted across the pages. His jaw set, for an eternal heartbeat. The court existed only in the scrape of paper and the ticking of an unseen clock. Then, "Admitted," one word, and the air changed shape. Kody exhaled a strangled laugh that didn't sound like laughter. "This is a circus," he muttered, tugging at his tie. "Emails taken out of context. Venting, none of this proves any." "Counsel," the judge said, ignoring him. "You may proceed." Christine's attorney didn't drag it out. She read. "Christine is a drain. I never intended her to have equal claim to the property. The land was always meant for Robyn's kids. The others will have to accept that." There are sounds a courtroom knows by heart. Heels on tile, gavel on wood, oath-taking voices. This wasn't one of them. This was the sound of a belief system breaking. Christine didn't look at Kody. She looked at the judge, at the jury, at the record. She let the words do what they had never been allowed to do at home. "Stand up." Meri's breath came out in a shaky burst. Janelle's steady posture bent for a second, as if the truth had weight. Even Robyn, whose name glowed in the very sentence, winced. Favoritism had always been rumored. Seeing it printed was something else. It didn't look like love. It looked like strategy. Out of context, Kody said again. "Thinner now, the way a rope thins before it snaps." The next page rose. "Meri is irrelevant. She'll never leave. Janelle won't fight. She's practical. Christine is too emotional to matter. This is about securing the future for the right household." A reporter's pen snapped clean in half. Someone in the back whispered "wow" and got shushed into silence. The jurors didn't move, but their eyes did, quick glances, flares of surprise, then back to the witness table where history was unfolding one line at a time. Christine stared at the table's polished edge, her reflection fractured by tiny scratches in the wood. She'd lived in those scratches. The places where a story gets worn by use, where love gets sanded down by being told and retold until only the convenient parts remain. "Your Honor," the attorney said, "these aren't heat-of-the-moment apologies or private confessions to a counselor. They are directives. They show motive. They show design." Kody surged up, both palms flat on the table, voice hot. "I was protecting my family. You have no idea what it takes. 18 kids. Multiple households. Someone had to make the hard calls." The judge's gavel struck once, a clean cut through the noise. "Sit down." He sat, but the energy couldn't. It bled into the aisles, ran the length of the gallery, climbed the walls until even the flag behind the bench seemed to hang heavier than before. Christine's attorney turned, not to the jury now, but to the wives on the bench behind her, women who had learned to speak softly to survive loud rooms. We will show, she said, that Mr. Brown's decisions weren't sacrifices. They were schemes. And the people who paid the price were the ones who trusted him most. She lifted a third page, and if the room could have gasped again, it would have. Don't worry about their signatures. I'll handle it. They'll follow. They always do. Christine felt it like a brand. Meri shut her eyes. Janelle whispered something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like a prayer, not for mercy but for clarity. And Robyn's face broke down to something hard to watch. The realization that favoritism doesn't protect you from the fallout of the truth. It only ties your name to it. Kody's lawyer finally found his voice. Your Honor, the provenance of these emails. Authenticated, the attorney said. Crisp. Server logs, matching headers, and corroborating metadata. We'll call the expert tomorrow. The judge nodded once. Curt. Noted, then let's stop pretending. The attorney continued. This isn't about a father making hard choices. It's about a man managing outcomes. There's a difference. And it's written by him, over and over again. Christine shifted. A small movement that still felt seismic. She had survived years of public smiles and private thunderstorms. Today the weather report got filed into the record. Janelle leaned in, her voice low. You okay? Not yet, Christine said. But I will be. Across the aisle, Kody twisted his ring finger like he was trying to unscrew a past that wouldn't come off. The reality show cadence was gone. There was no confessional to set the record straight, just the record. The judge checked the clock. We'll take a brief recess. No one left. They stood, they stretched, they whispered. But gravity kept everyone anchored. A producer in the second row checked his phone and mouthed, "It's everywhere." Hashtags were already forming like storm cells over the courthouse roof. When the judge returned, he carried a different kind of silence. The sober kind that wraps big choices. Christine's attorney changed tactics. Mrs. Brown, she said gently. How did you first learn about these emails? Christine took the stand like a person stepping onto solid ground after too long at sea. We suspected something for years. She said, voice even, promises that didn't match actions. Money that vanished into explanations. Then one day a message came, anonymous. It had a sample. I forwarded to counsel. They found the rest. Why bring them here? Because the truth shouldn't depend on who speaks the loudest. Christine said, it should depend on what actually happened. Did you ever consent to the sale or transfer of shared property without your knowledge? No. Did you ever sign away your claim? No. Did he ask you? No. The attorney nodded. No further questions. For now. Kody's counsel rose, eager for daylight. Mrs. Brown, he said, voice slick with courtroom polish. You're hurt. Understandably. But you're also angry. Correct? Christine didn't flinch. I'm done being quiet. That isn't an answer. It's the only one that matters. A few jurors almost smiled before remembering where they were. The cross fizzled. The foundation held. The emails didn't need Christine's anger to make them powerful. They carried their own voltage. Your Honor, the attorney said, closing the folder with a soft finality. The prosecution rests for today. Tomorrow we'll establish the chain of custody and bring in the forensic analyst. The judge gave a slow nod. This court will reconvene at 9 a.m. Do not discuss the case. Do not speculate online. This courtroom is not social media. The gavel hovered then fell. Chairs scraped. Bodies exhaled. The wives stood as one. An old habit that suddenly meant something new. Meri steadied herself. Janelle anchored Christine with a hand at the shoulder. And Robyn lingered like a question that didn't know where to land. Kody remained seated, eyes fixed on nothing, as if refusing to move could make the moment wait for him to catch up. Outside, news vans purred. Inside, the last few spectators filed out carrying fragments of sentences that would be repeated over dinner tables and group chats by nightfall. Christine paused at the aisle. She didn't turn toward him. She didn't need the confrontation anymore. The emails had done that for her. She looked instead at the exit, where fresh air and harsh light waited like an honest friend. Janelle whispered, you were brave. Christine shook her head. No, I was tired. Brave happened on its own. They stepped forward together. Behind them, the courtroom settled into stillness, the kind that makes echoes of the day ring longer than they should. On the bench, The judge stacked the emails into a neat, heavy pile. He'd seen families break in 100 different ways. This one was unusually public, unusually televised, unusually compelling, but it carried the same old truth. Paper doesn't lie. Down at the defense table, Kody finally stood. He ran a hand through his hair and glanced back at the empty jury box, as though the wood might offer sympathy. It didn't. He straightened his jacket, found a version of composure, and walked out a side door that didn't have cameras waiting. In the corridor, Christine's footsteps were light. For the first time in a long time, the ground felt honest. Outside, microphones waited, hungry. She wasn't sure what she'd say, and that was fine. She'd already said what mattered, just not out loud. He wrote it himself. The courthouse doors swung open, and daylight flooded everything. Headlines would spin, clips would trend, opinions would polarize. But the record was the record. And tomorrow it would get even sharper. Because today, the courtroom froze for a single email. Tomorrow it would thaw for the rest. The bailiff's voice cut through the low hum of the courtroom. Christine Brown, please take the stand. It wasn't a request. It was a command that carried decades of history in its echo. Every camera lens swung toward her. The audience, press, fans, even strangers shifted forward in their seats. And the three women in the gallery who once called her sister-wife, leaned in with the kind of breathless anticipation you feel right before lightning strikes. Christine stood slowly. She smoothed the front of her dress with trembling hands, then straightened her back. This was not the Christine viewers remembered. The soft-spoken peacemaker, the one who smiled through tears and laughed to cover heartache. No, this was a Christine reforged in fire, walking toward a witness chair that looked less like a seat and more like a battlefield. The clerk raised a Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Christine's voice was steady. I do. She sat, folding her hands tightly in her lap. But her eyes burned with something new. Her attorney approached with calm confidence. Mrs. Brown, can you tell the court why you are here today? Christine inhaled, slow and deep, as though she were pulling courage from the air itself. Then she spoke. I'm here, she said, because my family was built on lies. And I didn't want to believe it. But those emails proved what I already knew in my heart. Kody never saw me as equal. He never saw my children as equal. We were placeholders in his story. And the truth is written in his own words. The words hung heavy, and for a moment no one moved. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, pen poised above paper. The attorney nodded gently. Christine, can you explain how those words affected you? Christine's lips trembled, but she pressed on. They broke me. For years he promised us land, homes, security. He told my children they would have their own house, rooms they could decorate, gardens we could plant together. My daughter asked me where her bedroom would be, and I showed her a patch of dirt on that land. We believed him. We believed. Her voice cracked, but she swallowed the sob threatening to escape. Then I learned it was never meant for us. Not in his mind. Those emails weren't just words. They were proof that all those dreams were lies. Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. In the gallery, Meri's eyes glistened, and Janelle's jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat, shaking his head. That's not true. You're twisting. The judge slammed his gavel. Mr. Brown, you will remain silent unless addressed. Christine's attorney held up a page. Mrs. Brown, do you recognize this email? Christine nodded, her eyes hardening. Would you please read the highlighted portion to the court? Christine took the paper with trembling hands. She steadied her breath and read aloud. Her voice sharp, clear. Christine is too emotional to handle property decisions. She should never be given authority over assets. I'll manage everything. She'll follow. She always does. Her voice faltered only slightly on the last line. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. But the silence was deafening, like a scream being held back. Christine lowered the paper, her hands shaking. Do you know what it feels like to be told, over and over, that your voice doesn't matter, that your dreams don't matter, that you'll just follow because he thinks you're too weak to stand on your own? I believed him for years. But I'm here today because I don't believe him anymore. The jury shifted in their seats, uncomfortable but captivated. A reporter's pen slipped from her hand, and clattered on the floor. The attorney nodded. Christine, why now? Why break your silence after all these years? Christine looked straight ahead, her eyes glistening. Because silence was killing me. It was killing my children. Every lie we lived became another weight we carried, another secret we had to hide for the cameras. I smiled when I wanted to scream. I pretended to be happy when I was breaking inside. But when those emails came to light, I realized this wasn't just my burden anymore. It was evidence. It was truth. And truth belongs in the open. The words hit like a thunderclap. Even the judge looked momentarily shaken, scribbling quickly before glancing at Kody, whose face had turned the color of stone. From the gallery, Robyn's voice cracked through the silence. Christine, she sounded broken, almost pleading. But Christine didn't look at her. Not today. The attorney took a step closer. Christine, if you could say one thing to Mr. Brown right now, what would it be? Christine turned, finally letting her gaze land on Kody, the man she once trusted, the father of her children, the figure who had dictated her life for decades. Her lips trembled, but her voice was sharp as glass. I would tell him that he sold more than land. He sold trust. He sold love. He sold the very foundation of what he told us was sacred. And for what? To control us. To make us small. But I am not small anymore, Kody. And you don't get to write my story. The silence that followed was thicker than any words. Kody's face went red, his fists clenched. But he stayed silent, the weight of her words pinning him to his chair. Christine's attorney gave a small nod. No further questions. As Christine stepped down, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. The jury had seen her tears. They had heard her truth. And most importantly, they had believed her. The session ended with a gavel strike. But the echoes weren't just wood on wood. They were the sound of decades of silence breaking open. And everyone knew. The trial had only just begun. The bailiff called her name. And the room shifted. Christine's testimony had been raw, emotional, full of heartbreak. But now, it was Janelle's turn. And Janelle was different. Where Christine had fought with her heart, Janelle fought with facts. She stood, smooth and composed, clutching a thick folder of her own. As she walked toward the witness stand, the quiet sound of her heels echoed like a drumbeat of inevitability. Christine reached out, brushing Janelle's hand in silent solidarity as she passed. Janelle gave a small nod, then faced forward, her posture steady as steel. The clerk administered the oath. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do, Janelle replied, her voice calm but carrying. She sat, folding her hands neatly on the table in front of her. Unlike Christine, she didn't tremble, she didn't waver. She looked at the jury like a woman with nothing left to lose, and plenty to prove. Her attorney approached. Mrs. Brown, you've provided the court with documents you claim are tied directly to Mr. Brown's financial dealings. Can you explain what these are? Janelle nodded, opening the folder. The shuffle of papers was the only sound in the courtroom. She pulled out a stack of printouts, each marked with neat highlights and sticky notes. These, she said, are emails and bank statements. They show transfers of family funds into accounts controlled solely by Kody Brown, accounts none of us had access to. A murmur swept the gallery. Kody stiffened, his jaw tightening. Janelle continued, her voice unwavering. He always told us we couldn't afford certain things. That money was tight, that sacrifices had to be made. And we believed him, because why wouldn't we? He was the one managing the finances. But while Christine and I were pinching pennies, while Meri was told there wasn't enough for her projects, I found out Kody was funneling thousands into accounts that benefited only him and Robyn. The attorney stepped closer. And how did you discover this? Janelle's eyes narrowed slightly. By accident. I handle some of the family budgeting. And one day a notice came across my desk for a transfer I didn't recognize. I followed the trail. And what I found, she trailed off, shaking her head. It was like peeling back a rotten floorboard. Once you start, you can't stop seeing the decay. She handed the first document to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. This is an email where Kody assured a buyer that the wives won't interfere. He sold land without our consent, and then deposited the money here. She tapped the highlighted line, showing a transfer into a personal account under Kody's name. The judge's brow furrowed. He looked up at Kody. "Mr. Brown, do you dispute the authenticity of this document?" Kody shifted, tugging at his collar. These were preliminary talks. Nothing binding. Janelle's voice cut in, firm. "Then why is the transfer date stamped 2 days later?" The jury leaned forward. Even the court reporter's fingers hesitated above her keys for a moment before resuming. Janelle flipped to another page, holding it up. "This one shows money moved into an account shared only with Robyn. He always said the wives were equal, that decisions were collective. But these numbers prove the opposite. He wasn't building for all of us. He was building for one household." Gasps filled the room. Robyn's face crumpled, her hand flying to her mouth as tears welled. She shook her head, whispering, "Kody, please tell me this isn't true." But Kody's silence said more than words could. His shoulders hunched, his eyes dark, his lips pressed in a thin line of fury and fear. Christine reached out and clasped Meri's hand, the two women united in the quiet devastation of being proven right. Janelle placed one last sheet on the table. "This is the one that broke me," she said softly. An email Kody wrote to a realtor. In it he said, "Don't worry about Christine or Janelle. They'll fall in line. They always do. This deal is already in motion." Christine gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Meri's jaw dropped, her face twisted with disgust. Even the judge paused, his pen frozen mid-sentence. Janelle's voice grew louder, stronger. "That's what he thought of us. Not as wives, not as partners, not as equals. As obstacles to manage, and he thought he'd get away with it." The attorney let the silence stretch, then spoke. "Mrs. Brown, why did you bring these documents forward?" Janelle looked directly at Kody now. For years she had deferred to him, softened her words, played the role of the practical peacemaker. Not anymore. Because facts don't lie. Because you can twist words, but you can't twist numbers. And because our children deserve to know the truth, that the future you promised them was built on deception. The courtroom was electric. The jury scribbled furiously, reporters whispering headlines to themselves as though they were already live on air. Kody finally erupted, slamming his palm against the table. "This is slander. They're twisting everything. I did what I had to do to keep this family afloat." "Mr. Brown," the judge barked, gavel pounding. "Another outburst, and you will be held in contempt." The words seemed to drain the last bit of fight from Kody. For now, he slumped back in his chair, glaring at Janelle with eyes that no longer commanded fear, only desperation. Janelle, in contrast, sat straighter. She had delivered her bombshell, and the fragments of truth lay scattered across the courtroom floor for everyone to see. Christine wiped a tear, squeezing Janelle's hand as she returned to the plaintiff's table. Meri leaned in, whispering just loud enough for the microphones to pick up. "You just proved what we always knew. Thank you." The gavel struck again, closing the day's testimony. But the damage had already been done. Kody Brown's empire wasn't crumbling quietly anymore. It was collapsing in full view of the world. The courtroom had already witnessed heartbreak from Christine and hard evidence from Janelle. But what came next was something no one expected. The bailiff called her name, and for a moment the air seemed to stop moving. "Meri Brown, please take the stand." All eyes shifted. For years Meri had been the quiet one, the wife who rarely pushed back, who swallowed her anger behind a closed smile, who always looked like she was waiting for an invitation into her own family. Even now she hesitated, her hands fidgeting as she rose from the gallery. But when she stepped forward, there was a different weight in her stride. She walked to the witness stand slowly, as though every step pulled a memory out of her past. Every humiliation, every broken promise, every night she cried alone, while the world thought she was fine. By the time she reached the chair, her hesitation had transformed into something steadier. The clerk raised the Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" Meri's voice was soft but clear. "I do." She sat, folding her hands in her lap. For a moment she looked down, avoiding the eyes boring into her. Then she lifted her chin, and for the first time in a long time, She looked like a woman ready to be heard. Christine's attorney approached gently, her tone softer than before. Mrs. Brown, for years you've remained silent. Why did you decide to testify today? Meri inhaled deeply. Because I was tired of disappearing. The words stunned the room. Even Christine and Janelle turned toward her, their faces a mixture of shock and sympathy. Meri continued, her voice trembling but growing stronger with every word. For years I told myself I was part of something bigger, part of a family, part of a faith, part of a legacy. But the truth was, I was invisible. Kody made sure of that. Kody shifted uncomfortably, muttering under his breath. The judge shot him a warning glare. Christine's attorney lifted a document. Mrs. Brown, do you recognize this? Meri's eyes flicked to the page. She nodded slowly. Yes, it's one of the emails. Would you read the highlighted portion, please? Her hand shook slightly as she took the paper, but her voice was steady as she read. Meri is irrelevant. She'll never leave. She has nowhere else to go. She's safe because she has nothing without us. The courtroom erupted in gasps. Meri's hands trembled as she lowered the page, her lips pressed together as tears pooled in her eyes. For years she had suspected he thought of her this way, but seeing it in writing broke something open inside her. She looked at Kody now, her voice raw. Do you have any idea what it feels like to read that? To realize the man you gave your life to, thought you were worthless, that you stayed not because of love, but because he thought you had no choice. Kody's face turned red. That's not what Mr. Brown. The judge barked, slamming the gavel. One more interruption, and you will be removed from this courtroom. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Meri turned back to the jury. Her tears fell freely now, but her words were sharp. I stayed because I believed. I believed in family. I believed in him, even when I was alone, even when he ignored me, even when he made me feel like an outsider in my own home. I believed. And this is what I was worth to him. Irrelevant. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. Do you know what it does to a person to be erased while still alive? To be treated as furniture. Something that fills space but doesn't matter. I lived that. And now I see it wasn't just in how he acted. It was in his words, his emails, his truth. Christine wept openly in the gallery. Janelle pressed a hand to her mouth. Even Robyn, still seated behind Kody, let out a sob, whispering, Meri, I'm so sorry. Meri's attorney stepped forward again. Mrs. Brown, why bring this forward now? Meri wiped her tears, lifting her chin. Because silence is a prison. And I've been in it too long. If these emails had stayed hidden, maybe I'd still be there, smiling for the cameras, pretending to belong. But now? No. I won't vanish anymore. Not for him. Not for anyone. The jury watched her closely, some nodding almost imperceptibly. The impact of her words was undeniable. Kody couldn't hold it in any longer. He stood, his voice booming, desperate. Meri, you know I gave you everything. You stayed because you wanted to. Because you knew you were safe with me. Meri turned toward him, her face streaked with tears, her voice trembling but sharp as a blade. No, Kody. I stayed because I was scared. Scared to lose the only life I knew. Scared of being alone. But you counted on that fear. You counted on me being too weak to walk away. You thought I had nothing. And maybe I didn't then. But I have something now. I have my truth. The room was silent. No one dared breathe. The judge slammed his gavel. Order, Mr. Brown, you will remain silent, or you will be escorted out. Kody sat, his face pale, sweat trickling down his temple. For the first time he looked less like the patriarch of a vast family, and more like a man losing everything. Meri's attorney gave a small nod. No further questions. Meri remained seated for a moment longer, gathering herself. Then she rose, her steps slow but steady. As she returned to the plaintiff's table, Christine reached out, taking her hand. Janelle leaned closer, whispering, You did it. You finally said it. Meri smiled faintly, through her tears. I'm not invisible anymore. The gavel fell again, ending the session. But the words still echoed. Meri Brown, once silent, once sidelined, had broken her silence. and in doing so she had cracked open the last piece of Kody's facade. The truth wasn't just on paper anymore. It was alive, spoken, and irreversible. The judge called for the next witness, and the room fell into an uneasy hush. The wives shifted nervously in their seats. But this time the tension wasn't about Christine's fire or Janelle's receipts, or even Meri's shattering silence. This time, all eyes turned toward the woman who had never been far from Kody's side. Robyn Brown, please take the stand. The name rippled through the room, like a cold wind. Reporters whispered, pens hovered, cameras adjusted. For years fans had called her the favorite wife. The one Kody shielded. The one who received more love, more resources, more attention. But now, with the emails and evidence, that favoritism wasn't a rumor anymore. It was written in black and white. Robyn stood slowly, her steps hesitant. Her face was pale, lips trembling, hands clutched tightly around a folded tissue. She walked past Christine, Janelle, and Meri, their gazes a mixture of pity and anger, and reached the witness chair. When she sat, she looked smaller than she ever had, fragile, as if she might break with one more truth. The clerk approached. Do you swear to tell the truth? The whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Robyn's voice cracked. I do. She dabbed her eyes with the tissue, trying to steady herself. But the tears came anyway. Christine's attorney rose. Softer now, her tone almost cautious. Mrs. Brown, you've read the emails entered into evidence. How do they make you feel? Robyn swallowed hard, her shoulders shaking. Like my entire marriage is a lie. The courtroom gasped. Even Christine and Janelle froze, stunned to hear those words from her. Meri closed her eyes, a tear slipping free despite herself. Robyn clutched the tissue tighter. For years I thought I was special to him. He told me I was. He said the other wives didn't understand him, didn't support him the way I did. I believed him. I thought he was protecting me. Her voice broke, and she covered her mouth for a moment, sobbing quietly. But those emails, she shook her head, staring at the jury with wide, tear-filled eyes. They don't sound like love. They sound like strategy. Like I was just his excuse. His justification to abandon them. And I don't know how to live with that. The attorney nodded solemnly, then lifted a page. Mrs. Brown, would you please read the highlighted line? Robyn's hand trembled as she took the paper. She stared at it for a long moment, before whispering the words. Robyn will always be the legal one. The others don't matter. She's my safety net. My insurance. Her voice cracked, the last word barely audible. She lowered the page, her sobs overtaking her. The courtroom was still, the weight of her grief filling every corner. Christine pressed her lips together, looking down at the table. Janelle shook her head, muttering, unbelievable. Meri leaned back, her arms crossed, but her eyes softened, not with forgiveness, but with recognition. Robyn wiped her tears, forcing herself to continue. He told me I was chosen, that our marriage was different. But reading those words, I wasn't chosen. I was used. I was a tool to make him feel powerful, to justify cutting them out. He didn't love me more. He just used me differently. Her sobs turned into shaking, her hands trembling so hard the tissue crumpled into shreds. Do you know what it's like to realize you weren't loved? You were leveraged. The jury looked unsettled, shifting in their seats. Some scribbled furiously. Others simply stared at her, wide-eyed. The attorney pressed on gently. Mrs. Brown, in your own words, what do these emails prove? Robyn's chest heaved, as she drew in a shaky breath. They prove he lied to all of us. To Christine, to Janelle, to Meri, and to me. They prove that none of us mattered to him the way he claimed. Not even me. A tear slid down Christine's cheek. Janelle reached over, placing a hand on Christine's arm. Meri wiped her own face, her lips pressed in a tight line. For the first time in years, all four women were connected. Not as wives in competition, but as survivors of the same betrayal. Kody couldn't take it anymore. He leapt to his feet, slamming his hands against the table. Robyn, stop. Don't do this. You know I love you. You know you're the only one who The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Sit down, Mr. Brown. You are out of order." But Robyn's sobbing voice cut through him. "No, Kody. If you loved me, you wouldn't have written those things. You wouldn't have made me part of your cruelty. You broke them, and you broke me too." Her words echoed in the stunned silence. Reporters scribbled so fast their pens scratched against the paper. The jury stared at her, some visibly moved, others stone-faced. Robyn buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking violently as she cried. For years she had been painted as the protected one, the favored one, the untouchable wife. But now, under oath, in front of the world, she was shattered, stripped of the illusion that had once made her untouchable. Christine's attorney gave her a moment, then spoke gently. "Mrs. Brown, one final question. Do you feel that Mr. Brown treated you fairly?" Robyn lifted her face, streaked with tears, and shook her head. "No, none of us were treated fairly. We were pawns in his game, and I'm ashamed that I didn't see it sooner." Her voice broke again as she whispered the last line. "I thought I was the lucky one. But there's nothing lucky about being the last lie standing." The courtroom sat frozen in silence. Christine wiped her eyes. Janelle bowed her head. Meri pressed her lips tight to keep from breaking again. And Kody, he looked stunned, betrayed by the very woman he thought would never turn against him. The gavel came down. Bang. Court will adjourn until tomorrow. But the damage was done. Robyn Brown had broken down, and in doing so she had broken the final piece of Kody's defense. The wives walked out together, leaving Robyn seated alone, still sobbing. For the first time she wasn't by Kody's side, and the world watching knew. If even Robyn couldn't defend him anymore, Kody Brown's empire was finished. The courtroom felt heavier than ever. Christine's pain had pierced through hearts. Janelle's facts had stacked like bricks. Meri's silence had shattered into fury. And Robyn's tears had drained what little sympathy was left in the room. Now all eyes turned to the man at the center of it all. The judge's voice cut sharp through the tension. "Mr. Brown, the court will now hear your defense." Kody Brown rose slowly, smoothing his jacket as though neat fabric could hold back the chaos swirling inside him. For years he had been the patriarch, the narrator of his family's story. On television, in his home, in his church, his voice carried weight. But here, under oath, the weight was different. It pressed down, it suffocated. He stepped forward, hands gripping the podium so tightly his knuckles whitened. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with that old fire, the stubborn need to control the narrative. "Your Honor," he began, his voice loud and sharp, "what we are witnessing here is not justice. It is a vendetta. These women I sacrificed for, women I provided for, have twisted this court into a stage for their revenge." Gasps rippled across the room. The wives stiffened. Christine shook her head slowly, while Janelle's eyes narrowed. Meri stared at him with a mixture of disgust and pity. Robyn buried her face in her hands. Kody pressed on, pacing back and forth. "Yes, I sent those emails. Yes, I made decisions about property. But I did what any man would do with 18 children and 4 households to manage. Do you think raising a family like this is easy? Do you think the bills just paid themselves?" He slammed his fist against the podium. "I carried the financial weight for decades. Alone, I was the one in meetings, the one negotiating contracts, the one making sure the lights stayed on and food was on the table. Did anyone thank me? No. And now, because of a few words pulled out of context, I'm being painted as some kind of criminal." Christine's attorney shot up. "Your Honor, this is not about context. This is about intent." "Mr. Brown," but Kody cut her off, his voice rising. "Don't lecture me about intent. My intent was always survival. My intent was to hold this family together when they were tearing it apart with their bitterness, their jealousy, their endless complaints." The judge slammed the gavel. "Mr. Brown, you will not raise your voice in this courtroom. Do you understand?" Kody froze, then nodded stiffly, gripping the podium tighter. His chest heaved as he tried to calm himself. He cleared his throat and spoke again, softer but still defiant. "The truth is, these women never wanted equality. They wanted control." Christine left because she couldn't handle sharing. Janelle pretends she's logical, but she undermined me at every turn. Meri, he paused, sneering. Meri checked out years ago. And Robyn? She was the only one who believed in me. At that, Robyn lifted her tear-streaked face, her voice trembling. Don't you dare put this on me. I believed in you because you told me lies too. Kody's jaw tightened, his face reddening. No. I told you the truth they couldn't handle. But the jury wasn't buying it. They shifted in their seats, some frowning, others looking down at their notes. The damage was visible. The attorney stepped forward. Mr. Brown, isn't it true that you transferred family funds into private accounts without your wife's consent? Kody raised his chin defiantly. I had to. They didn't understand the bigger picture. Someone had to make the hard choices. Isn't it true, she continued, that you explicitly wrote in your emails that Christine, Janelle and Meri don't matters? Kody's voice cracked. Those were words of frustration. Do you think it's easy being mocked, questioned, disrespected by the very people you sacrifice for? I was venting. Every man vents. But his words rang hollow. Even the court reporter paused for a split second, her eyebrows raised, before resuming. Christine's attorney pressed harder. Mr. Brown, in one email you called Robyn your safety net, and said the others will follow. They always do. Were you venting then, or were you planning to sideline them all along? Kody opened his mouth, then shut it. His lips trembled. His silence spoke louder than words. The jury leaned in. Reporters scribbled faster. The wives sat still, their faces a mosaic of grief, anger, and grim satisfaction. Finally Kody spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. They never supported me. None of them. I had to secure my future somehow. Christine gasped, covering her mouth. Janelle muttered. There it is. Meri closed her eyes, a tear slipping down. Robyn shook her head violently, whispering, how could you say that out loud? Kody's attorney tried to recover. Your Honor, my client simply meant. But the judge raised a hand, silencing him. His eyes bored into Kody. Mr. Brown, the court has heard enough. You may step down. Kody's shoulders sagged. He stumbled back to his seat, his once commanding presence reduced to a man shrinking under the weight of his own words. The gavel struck. Bang. Retention booster at approximately 1,200 words in. But just when Kody thought the worst was over, the judge's face darkened, and the real reckoning was about to begin. The session ended, but the damage lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Kody had tried to defend himself, but instead, he had exposed the truth. It was never about love, never about family, it was about power. And now, that power was gone. The wives rose together as the court adjourned. Christine looked steady, Janelle resolute, Meri quietly fierce. Even Robyn, still trembling, seemed lighter, as though the illusion had finally shattered. Kody stayed seated, slumped forward, his hands covering his face. For years he had controlled the narrative, but in this courtroom, under oath, with the world watching, his story had finally slipped beyond his control. And Session 7 would prove that the final word wouldn't come from him. It would come from the judge. The gavel struck, and the courtroom froze. The sound echoed like thunder against the walls, and even the cameras fell silent, their clicks slowing as though they too were waiting. The judge removed his glasses, rubbed his temples, and looked out over the crowded room. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone, but his eyes carried a weight that made everyone sit straighter. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice deep and steady, we have heard the testimonies. We have examined the evidence. We have listened to pain, betrayal, and anger. This is no ordinary case. This is a case about family, about trust, about promises broken. He paused, glancing toward the wives. Christine sat with her hands clasped tight, her face set in resolve. Janelle leaned forward, her papers neatly stacked, her eyes unflinching. Meri sat rigid, her lips pressed in a thin line, but her eyes glistening. And Robyn, still trembling, dabbed at her face with a crumpled tissue, her gaze fixed on the floor. Finally the judge turned his gaze to Kody Brown, and it is about power. Kody shifted uneasily, his jaw tight, his hands gripping the edge of the table. For once, he didn't speak. The weight of the judge's stare held him like chains. The judge continued, his words cutting like a blade. Brown, this court has reviewed your emails. your transactions, your words. You claim to act for the good of your family, but your actions tell a different story. A story of favoritism, a story of secrecy, a story of deception. He lifted one of the emails, holding it up for all to see. When a husband writes that one wife is irrelevant, that another is too emotional, that his children's future does not matter, this court cannot call that leadership. It cannot call that love. It can only call that betrayal. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Christine covered her mouth, her eyes brimming. Janelle's lips trembled, her shoulders shaking as she fought to hold back her emotions. Meri let out a soft sob, quickly muffled. Even Robyn let out a choked cry, burying her face in her hands. The judge set the paper down firmly. This court has seen husbands lie. This court has seen fathers fail. But rarely has this court seen betrayal written so clearly, in a man's own hand. Kody's face drained of color. He opened his mouth as if to argue, but the judge raised a hand, silencing him instantly. Mr. Brown, you claimed your words were taken out of context, but context does not change the fact that you wrote them. Context does not erase the truth that you believed them. You reduced these women, the mothers of your children, your partners in life, to obstacles, pawns, irrelevancies. And now the consequences of those words have come home to you. The courtroom was utterly silent. Even the reporters stopped writing, their pens hovering mid-air. The judge leaned forward, his voice lower now, but sharper. Do you know what your wives gave you, Mr. Brown? They gave you their loyalty, their faith, their futures. They raised your children, they built your homes, they carried your burdens, and you repaid them with secrecy and contempt. His eyes softened slightly as he looked toward the wives. And yet they stood here. They told their stories. They exposed their pain to the world, not for vengeance, but for justice. This court commends their courage. Christine wiped a tear. Janelle exhaled shakily. Meri bowed her head, and Robyn sobbed quietly into her tissue. Then the judge's voice boomed again. But courage is not enough. The law must speak. He shuffled his papers, his expression hardening once more. Mr. Brown, this court cannot ignore the clear evidence of financial misconduct. It cannot ignore your own admissions, your own words, your own lies. The time for excuses is over. Kody's shoulders slumped. His eyes darted toward the jury, toward Robyn, toward the exit, as though looking for an escape that wasn't there. His lips moved soundlessly, but no words came. The judge's words cut deeper. You told these women they were irrelevant. But today this court tells you, they are not irrelevant. Their voices matter. Their rights matter. Their futures matter. And this court will not allow them to be silenced again. The gallery erupted in quiet gasps, muffled sobs, and whispered exclamations. The wives sat straighter, their pain mingled now with vindication. For the first time, their suffering had been publicly named, validated, given weight. The judge's gavel struck once, commanding silence again. This court will now prepare its ruling. But let there be no mistake. The days of Mr. Brown, hiding behind power, behind secrecy, behind favoritism, are over. Kody lowered his head into his hands. His body shook slightly, but whether from rage, humiliation, or despair, no one could tell. The wives, in contrast, sat taller. Christine's hand found Janelle's, squeezing it tightly. Meri reached over, linking her fingers with Christine's. Even Robyn, broken as she was, inched slightly closer to the others. For the first time in years, they were united. The judge's final words rang out like thunder. Tomorrow this court will deliver its verdict. The gavel fell, bang, and the room exploded into sound. Reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, spectators buzzing like a hive. But at the center of it all, Kody sat motionless, his world collapsing around him.